The back catalogues of Games Workshop and Citadel miniatures are like a giant magical vault filled with piles of nostalgic treasure. As long as it's handled carefully, Games Workshop can just open the vaults and show off the precious items for a short while, and after they are done, place them back in the vault for another day down the road. As long as you treat everything with respect and don't overdo it, you can take several trips into these vaults a year. No need to commission new art, make new rules, or create expensive plastic molds. No need to hold large amounts of stock in a warehouse or ship them back and forth in stores. Games Workshop can act like a carnival showman. Roll up, come and see a full set of Jez Goodwin's 1991 Space Marine armor variants. Just drive your car without insurance this month. Then a few months later, when the backlog has cleared, come and see all the old mounted heroes of the Empire. The kids can just duct tape their shoes together this semester. This reminds me of a certain story about a goose that laid golden eggs, and how absolutely delicious the goose was when it was killed and eaten, and how the golden eggs all made little geese, which were also equally delicious, and that's somehow why we have no turtles left in the Galapagos Islands. If I'm honest, my school days were spent largely thinking about Warhammer, and therefore I'm not entirely sure if that's the correct ending. But anyway, recently this magical vault got even more exciting. We got an unheard of event. Warhammer The Old World. I think everyone, including me, has been taken aback at just how successful it's been. It's just as well, because if Workshop had waited any longer with the release, it would risk having the diet of the average wargamer taking its natural toll on their potential customer base. An interesting wrinkle has been the large amount of models needed to make an old world army. Games Workshop's quite reasonable unwillingness to commit to making a dozen new plastic box sets for each of the 9 core factions has led to the compromise of them offering old models for sale once again. We've had old designs cleaned up, remastered and offered with extra parts, such as the Tomb of Souls with open lid and the Bone Giant with new head. We even had a new model sculpted to fit up with the existing old designs, the third carrier miniature that exists to ensure players have a unit of 3 unique models to use. If only there was some kind of painting competition that happened every May focusing on old miniatures. Anyway, with more down the way, such as the Marauder Giant, the future, or rather the past, is looking bright. So while Games Workshop are in the mood, here are 10 kits I'd love to see remastered and released again. Number 1, the Warhammer Quest Elf Ranger by Jez Goodwin. Typically, if you think of me pitching for a Jez Goodwin mini to be idolised, you'd assume the 40k Elder Aspect Warriors. However, as the High Elves are soon to arrive for Warhammer The Old World, this model would be perfect. Everything Jez Goodwin does is great, and you could re-release old sculpts of his until the sun burns out. The Elf Ranger model is something that I totally forgot existed until someone added it to their story on Instagram. In Warhammer Quest, this ranger could either be a melee focused or magical focused individual, leveling up as the player gained experience, and if Workshop could release it in its original packaging complete with booklet and Dave Gallagher's artwork, it would be absolutely amazing. We are getting the Warhammer Quest Troll Slayer by Ali Morrison when the dwarfs get released for the Old World, and I'd be surprised if the War Dancer model that won last year's Oldendemon competition wasn't around the corner as well. Most of the models in the old Warhammer Quest range eventually found homes in people's Warhammer armies, and I fully expect more of them to appear in future, as I believe a few of them, especially the ones featured in the box expansions, are hidden gems. Number 2, the Empire War Wagon by Alan and Michael Perry. I originally added this to the list as a kind of what-if entry, but after seeing some of the other models that are being planned for re-release like Azag the Slaughterer, honestly why wouldn't you have an Empire War Wagon? Probably because old giants and orcs on wyverns are considered an alternate version of a newer sculpt, while there is nothing quite like an Empire War Wagon in the old world setting. Let's have a look at the Mary Berry recipe book for old miniatures. First of all, you take 1 part rectangular metal box that needs to be fully straight to assemble correctly, another part 6 metal crewmen that would have to be individually pinned into the metal base of the wagon, a pinch of 4 small contact points for the plastic wheels, and finally ice all over the top with loads of weird weapons that point out at strange angles and catch people's hands and clothing. Congratulations, you just baked an Oldhammer cake. A cake full of chipped metal and tears. Thematically, the War Wagon was, and still is, excellent. Just don't touch it, or move it, or draw breath nearby. Number 3, the Wartime Freelance Knight by Brian Nelson. This sexy boy is totally not Don Quixote, but he is 100% awesome. A long list of painters have tackled this, and now that the old plastic horse sprue is back in the wild, there is no excuse to not bring back both versions of him. The Freelance Knight came out alongside the release of Wartime, which is why his shield has a fish nail to the side of it. The original blister came with a version of him on foot and a version of him mounted, and they were both absolutely fantastic. The original was a Brian Nelson design, but when Darren Latham was learning to sculpt, he spent 2 weeks sculpting a replica of it, and if you're going to spend 2 weeks looking at one miniature very closely, why not this one? Interestingly, when I saw the 2024 event-only miniature for Age of Sigmar, the Arch Knight known as the Steel Rook, I got some major Freelance Knight vibes. Maybe it's the pose, but when I went back and saw the bird skull pendant on the Freelance Knight, and the fact that the other Free Guild Arch Knight has a Fish Knight alternate version, I am now convinced that they are one and the same. He just needs a salmon stapled to his back and we're golden. If I can detour for a minute, a slight problem with all of these is that if they ever get made, they will arrive in the white mail order boxes rather than the era appropriate packaging, which is a bit of a drawback. Honestly, Workshop just need to find a way to remaster the appropriate blister packs and drop a few a year as a kind of limited edition thing. Just like the kind of faux retro action figures you can get. Imagine Tectus released in the yellow and red Warhammer Fantasy blister with the red foam. If they make less than $500,000 from selling a 1991 Space Marine captain with Terminator honors in the mid-90s era black and yellow blister pack, I will publicly eat the rest of the unsold stock live on YouTube. And that is a promise. Number 4, The Eagle Rider by Mike McVeigh, by way of other sculptors. Technically, and by technically I mean actually, this is a conversion, so if anything this would probably be the basis for a fresh new plastic kit for the Wood Elf range rather than a remaster or reprint. But if there was a way that this kit could somehow be made available, it would be great. The reason I've broken all my rules and picked this out is that this model was all over the promotional material for Games Workshop in the 90s. It was an eye-opening moment for a lot of people when they realised that this hobby allowed you to make a totally original model out of parts of different models and then use your new creation on the tabletop with rules to fight against your opponents. You couldn't get that kind of experience while playing Wolfenstein 3D. Also of note here is the David Bowie style makeup for the Wood Elf line that sadly was discontinued mid-90s when they got their army book for Warhammer 5th edition. I don't think it's too late to make a comeback. I'll be wearing it for Salute this year. Number 5, The Metal Warp Spiders by Jez Goodwin. Listen, at least I waited until number 5 to talk about the Warhammer 40,000 Jez Goodwin Elder Aspect Warrior sculpt. I know, I just couldn't help myself. These were released in March 1994. A lot of people seem to really bounce off of them, probably because of the massive weapon-to-body proportions, but I have a soft spot for these guys, possibly because of all the carnage they caused in 2nd edition and various points during their lifetimes where, due to whatever edition's rule updates, they suddenly became the hot new meta craze for the Elder army. They even got converted to Finecast at one point, but the miniature connoisseurs of the world would of course prefer them in lead or white metal. These 30-year-old miniatures were all the rage in the Elder armies before Games Workshop released their brand new plastic kit containing all new designs and a brand new multi-part exile. I just need to find a picture of it here somewhere. Oh. Number 6, The Champion of Slaanesh. I'm not sure who sculpted this one, although I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments. Once we start moving back in time to the late 80s to look at the miniatures that were available for the legendary Realms of Chaos books, things start to get a bit weird, especially when we look at the range of Slaanesh models that were produced back then. I think it's fair to say the Chaos Marines riding steeds haven't aged that gracefully. Meanwhile, the Fiends of Slaanesh are nightmare fuel if there ever was such a thing. But if the Dwarf Prince Ulther and the Dragon Company can brave the trip from 1987, anything is possible. Let's face it, if these snotling bases that predate Warhammer 40,000 are getting a re-release, why not? Why do I like this model in particular? Is it the colour scheme? Is it again the use of it in the promotional material of the time? Is it the battle report in White Dwarf 195? Or is it the codpiece? It's the codpiece. If there are any cosplayers out there, this is the ultimate challenge. Number 7, The Nurgle Plague Tower by Dave Andrews. You know what, I'm in charge now and most people have already clicked off the video, so no one is watching this at this point anyway. This model was designed back when epic miniatures were being sculpted with no regard to ever being copied in 28mm scale, which explains the wild design. According to the background, this model contains a greater demon of Nurgle at its heart, as well as hundreds of chaos worshippers who assault models via drawbridges when it pulls up in range. Stuff like this is a fascinating look back at what Warhammer 40,000 Nurgle vehicles were like before they crystallised into the corrupted Imperial vehicle designs that they are today. And who can ignore that massive banner, a hallmark of epic models during the era of Titan Legions? This mod really stands out for me because of the astonishing paint job. The weathering on the side was really ahead of the time for the heavy metal models of this vintage. I know it's rare for Workshop to remaster models that are unusable for a current game system, but since I'm wishlisting, are we sure we can't have a Phantom or Warlock Titan, or an Orc mech by Gargan? What about an Elder Bright Stallion? Oh dear, maybe the power has gone to my head. Maybe I need to sit down. Maybe I just need a nice bowl of soup. That's an idea. Number 8, The Halfling Hotpot by Alan and Michael Perry. Quick pop quiz. What came first, the Halfling Hotpot or the Doom Diver? You have 3 seconds to lock in your guess. 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is the Halfling Hotpot. The Doom Diver came out 4 months later, complete with its wheeled catapult and equally iconic goblin. Gambo Hartstock and his group of line chefs were the original meme artillery piece for Empire armies after having catapulted their soup over a group of goblin wolf riders and impressed the Emperor Karl Franz enough that they were hired for full-time battlefield assistance. The Doom Diver went on to get a larger and much more practical looking model, whereas the Hotpot and associated halflings vanished around 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy. The Halfling Hotpot has already come up once on Made to Order, but this time they can be put up for sale with the rest of the Perry's Halfling sculpts in a kind of Regiment of Renown style set, crucially with the new square bases this time. Number 9, the original Greater Demon of Tzeentch. No, not that one. No, not that one with the original head. No, not either of these two for Epic. I mean the original one, going way back to 1989, when you had random kits made up of several versions of the body and several versions of the head and tail. Paul Muller's version is probably the best of these, with his skeletal bird head that served as the prototype for what came next. With the scale creep and the no demons rule in Warhammer the Old World, it's more of a curiosity and is unlikely to ever see the light of day again. But then again, I did stick a plague tower on this list, so who knows. Number 10, The Lair of the Orc Lord by Gary Morley. I was originally going to pick one of the miniatures from this set, but then after seeing Boggoth the Snotling cheekily stealing the party's lantern, Growler the Squig with his awesome mohawk, and Gubbins the Goblin Jester, that's like asking an MP to pick their favourite dogging spot. So why not have them all in one go, along with Warlord Gorgut and Scabnose the Shaman. Gary Morley really shined when sculpting models with a sense of humour. These, along with the Blood Bowl teams, might be his best work. The 2 different Orc Big Gun models would fit nicely with the re-released Orc Big Guns for the Old World's Orc and Goblin Tribes army release. When we hit 100,000 subscribers, maybe I'll do a Games Workshop's Jester models tier list. I can only think of 3 currently, so if I'm missing anything, let me know in the comments. Well, there we go. Once again, I have to thank my Ko-fi subscribers who are keeping the channel going. You can join them for as little as £2 a month. If you enjoy the history of Games Workshop, hit subscribe and maybe check out some of my other videos here. Until then, see you next time.